Hello, and welcome to another episode of Poodling Around. Now, keen gardeners everywhere will be currently wondering what jobs need doing to keep their garden looking tip-top. But what jobs need doing if you're in charge of the world's oldest topiary garden and the surrounding heritage gardens that date back to 1694? Well, I invited back a former guest, Chris Crowder, head gardener of Levens Hall and Gardens in the Lake District, Cumbria, to tell us what will be happening over the next 6 months. Good morning, Chris. How are you today?
Good morning. Yes, right enough. Thank you. It's a lovely day, and I'm raring for it.
Great. Okay. So we're now entering the month of September, which is the final month of the season for Levens Hall and Gardens. So what can people see in the gardens if they come along and visit you before October the 6th when you close?
Well, I suppose they can see the garden in its full late summer glory. We grow a lot of annual plants in the garden, as well as the perennials and the shrubs and the trees and all the rest of it. And a lot of those, actually, it's their peak time. So we grow them to extend the display right through till the day we close. So there's a lot of flowers to see, a lot of colour. And there's a lot of there's fuzzy topiary, but they'll begin to see us clipping it, of course.
Yes, I saw some pictures of some fuzzy topiary yesterday. It looks quite cute when it's got all that fuzz around it, doesn't it?
Well, our topiary is in need of a haircut, and it'll be receiving it from Monday onwards.
Oh, I see. So, yes, we'll get onto the topiary in a minute, and that's evergreen, isn't it? But, are there autumnal colours that people can see starting to develop in the gardens?
Yes, there is. There's a plant called the Katsura tree, the Circidophyllum, and that's beginning to colour already out there in the gardens. A lot of things are still green, that sort of late summer heavy dark green colour, but over the next month or so, the limes will be starting to turn yellow, the beech golden, things like that. So the autumn colour comes in. But that tree I mentioned is unusual for its autumn colour in that actually the colour's beautiful. It's sort of reds and golds and all the rest of it, but it's the scent that it produces. I mean, plants, sometimes the flowers produce scent, but this particular tree, it's the leaves when they turn autumnal, when they start to turn brown, they give off an air carried quite strong scent of, I don't know, some people say it's a toffee tree or something like that, toffee or, I don't know, strawberries. It's quite, anyway, it's wafting through the air. And where's it come from? It comes from these autumn-looking leaves.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? I didn't realise that sort of thing could happen. The toffee sounds delightful, so people will be rushing to the sweet shop after that. But what sort of jobs are you going to be doing over the next 5 weeks before you close?
Well, for us, it's just keeping the garden tidy. We get quite a lot of visitors through the month of September and very early October. And they tend to be, the discerning, the garden lovers, that sort of visitor. And so we try and keep the place looking as good as possible, which for us means pulling out the weeds, mowing the grass, doing the edges, and attending to the detail, sometimes deadheading, watering if necessary, and the pots and the urns as they get bigger and fuller. So it's just keeping that detail of the quality of the finish going right through to the end.
And you've sort of hinted at this, but I think September is a month in which the long process of dealing with a topiary and tending to its needs really starts, isn't it?
It is. Of course, the garden's famous for its topiary. It's the best, the oldest topiary garden in the world, the most extensive, which means we've got an awful lot of it to get clipped and trimmed ready for the next year. And I often think of September the 1st or thereabouts as the start of my new year, because everything we do is all about next period on. Apart from just keeping that detail going, we're sowing the seeds for next year, and we're, of course, clipping that topiary for next year. And that kicks off, and from September on, it'll a couple of months' work to get through all the topiary pieces and sharpen them up again for the new season ahead. And then it's on after Christmas with the hedges around the garden. So, but yeah, it's a lot of clipping work coming up.
And so I guess during September, people who are visiting can actually see you doing that, and can they ask questions about that?
Absolutely, yes. We'll be starting in one corner of the topiary garden and working our way around. We usually get a big hydraulic lift, cherry picker, to do the tops of the pieces, and that's coming next week. And we'll be up there in the air, taking the tops growth off and sharpening everything up. And we gradually move around, maybe a couple of pieces every day until we get the lot done. There's over 100 pieces, so it takes quite a while.
And I guess when the door's shut, you can kind of like up the ante with that and really get sort of stuck into the cherry picking and all the health and safety things that you can't do when visitors are around.
Of course, yes. Well, the visitors around, we have to tape the little area we're working off. We don't want to drop anything on the visitors, but
Mm.
once the season's closed, we can remove the tape and just press ahead. And of course, and then it gets into the wetter, the colder, the darker months of the year. But we have to keep on pushing on, whatever it is.
Mm. So I suppose by the time you get to December, there's not much light for you to actually be working in. The days must be quite short for what you have to do with the topiary by the time you get to that sort of time of the season.
Absolutely, it's getting darker, and yes, I have been known in frustration to go out with a head torch on just to get a little bit more done. But we tend
Yes.
not to do that. It's short days. We try and get what we can done when we can still see it before the light goes.
Mm. So the topiary is one thing, isn't it? Because at least you've got some sort of shape there. I guess with the hedges, that must be a bit of a bind because literally you're just reducing sort of the growth on the hedge, aren't you?
Well, I don't say it's as much as a bind, but it's more the same every day. Whereas a topiary piece, obviously, it takes a few hours to do, and then you can stand back and it looks good. But the hedges, if you're on a straight line of hedge, and we've got a beech hedge that's 500 meters long in the garden here, we are on the same thing for a long time. But even then, we have to keep the concentration. We want the hedges to be absolutely dead straight, and we'll put lines down, and dead vertical. We'll use spirit levels on long pieces of wood tied in. So we've got that pride in getting it spot on. Unfortunately, sometimes the wind blows afterwards and knocks about our work. It always happens, but when we're finished, we leave it perfect, and then the weather might push it out. I say.
Yeah, and just to give people an idea, we're not talking about a low level hedge here, are we? We're talking about something that's pretty high and pretty wide.
Yeah, the very old beech hedge in the garden is maybe 5 meters high and 5 meters across, and it's the height's not too bad to get to. We've got either hydraulic lift or we can go up on wheeled scaffold towers, but the width is enormous. So we float over the top with a hydraulic lift, which sounds great, but then the hedge is way below your feet, so we have to lean out, strapped up with a harness, and clip away at the top. It's a major operation for us, and yeah, keeps us busy through those dark winter months, along with all the other things we have to do in a garden. There's
Yeah,
four of
tell us
them.
about some of those other things that you'll be doing as well. What else is
Well,
going on?
bedding plants have to come out, but certainly in the next month or so, and actually starting this week, we are actually growing everything for next year. So from seed in the greenhouses, we don't buy it in. We start it all from that seed, dust-like seed, and we grow 15,000 plants to go in the garden in spring. So my head's already on next spring. And we take a lot of cuttings in the autumn of tender things, so we've got something to go at over the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we've got work around the back as well as around the front. All the herbaceous borders need cutting down. All the other borders need clearing. The flowers underneath the topiary needs clearing. All the beds need digging and prepping up. The pruning needs doing. Yeah, there's an endless list of jobs. It's less time sensitive over the 6 months of the winter. It's like 6 months. Absolutely, things need to be done within a day or so of their slot. Otherwise, it's going to pot. And in the winter 6 months, we've just got a 6 months list that needs doing before spring starts again. We go around in circles in a way in the garden. The seasons follow each other, and we keep chasing our tails to see if we can get ahead of ourselves.
So looking at the bedding plants, have you got any plans for things that might be different for next year? Anything new that's going to be introduced?
Well, we change a little every year. It's a very historic garden, and we try to give it a feel of history. So we're careful with the sort of plants we'll use in the garden, the style of planting we use in the garden, to evoke that historic feel. But we do swap the plants around every year. I get the catalogues in, glossy catalogues, and we look through all the plants, and there's always new ones coming in. And if you like, we test the new ones against the old ones. And if the new ones provide the look we want in various places, the old ones we mark out 10. And yeah, if the old ones fail, the new ones go in. So there is a slow but subtle change throughout the seasons.
Yes.
The main push of the bedding plants, the 15,000 we grow for under the topiary, is fairly static each year because it's the type of plant we can grow, but it's also the only sort of plants you can do on that sort of scale. So there's a lot of pansies in various colours, and double daisies. And we grew a new form last year, the double daisy, a much longer flowered, looser flower. So we're growing a lot more of that this year because that passed the test. We liked it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be doing a little less of something else. So pansies, double daisies, tulips in spring. We're growing the drumstick primulas in 3 colours this year, which we haven't done for a few years. So there'll be a slight different feel in spring. And then when it goes on to summer, we're straight in from that spring planting to growing the summer stuff. It'll be a lot of what we're growing this year because we really love the displays. The sort of mixed plantings, but colourful plantings, and more, I call them tapestry plantings, like one colour but different feels and forms to the flowers through the beds in different colourways. And especially for the bees and the butterflies, it looks like a wild meadow almost, but more so, if you like. And that's been successful through the last couple of summers. So we're doing more and more of that.
Yes, I've seen a lot of purple and sort of pale yellow this year, which was lovely under the topiary. That looked really charming in summer, I think. It sort of accentuated the topiary colours, but also had a nice sort of colour to the whole thing itself, which I found really nice. But, talking about colour, are you influenced by what colours you're using in certain parts of the garden? Because I know you've got certain beds where you have to have a certain type of colour because you've got sort of the red beds, I think they're called, and the pastel colour.
Certainly when we come to the herbaceous borders, it's a large garden. Well, it's large or small by big garden standards, or large by small garden standards. It's about 4 hectares or something, and very intensively gardened everywhere. But it's split by hedges into separate rooms, and we can use that to theme different areas differently. So it's like wandering through a series of different gardens, and we use the colour idea to make the areas different, because otherwise every area could be very similar to every other area. Once you've done one bit, you've done the lot. So we do the border theming down to colours. So we have a grey border, we have pastel borders, which are like pinks, blues and yellows. We have red and purple borders. In other areas in the garden, we have vegetable borders. Then we have the wall borders, the fruit area, the bee borders. So we've split the garden up like that into different themed areas. So every time you pop through a hedge, you're in a new garden.
Yes, and does scent ever actually influence what you're going to do as well? Do you think about scent in the planting, or is that just something that comes around?
Scent comes along on its own, or like in the rose garden, all the roses are chosen for the scent, and they've done really well this year. And interestingly, every flower, we've got mixed colours through the rose garden, and each one has its own particular flavour. If you want that scent, it's so you can go through sniffing them. They don't just all smell of what you call a rose. If you tune in and go to a different flower, it'll have different notes in that scent. So that's a nice aromatic area. In the herb garden, there's lots of scents, of course. And in the bedding itself, we use a lot of one particular plant gives a lot of scent, and you can smell it a long way away. It's the heliotrope. It's a variety called Chatsworth. It's quite a bit of trouble to grow because you can't grow it from seed. You have to take the cuttings, and it doesn't like being overwintered. But we get as much of that mixed in as possible because it gives a lovely scent to the garden. I think the Americans call it cherry pie because of that scent. Yes, so it's a bit of a vanilla, maybe, well, they think it smells like cherry pie. And once somebody says cherry pie to you and sniff it, you think, oh, yes, maybe cherry pie.
Yes, so it sounds delightful. That and the toffee, I mean, got everything going on, haven't you? So back to the topiary. I know that the aim is to really sort of get that looking pristine by sort of April when you open, and May is probably when it's at its best, isn't it? And that's the month in which you've got this thing called World Topiary Day that you've had for the past 2 years. Is it going to be happening again next year?
Yes, we will be celebrating the topiary in May, World Topiary Day, and we decided to dream up a celebration then because it's when it looks its best. That's when the garden beneath it also looks its best, because as soon as we've clipped it, we'll have clipped the topiary by Christmas, but there's nothing in the garden, no flowers there. So come May, that's the peak time. The topiary hasn't started to grow, so the topiary is still looking sharp. And by May, the sky will be blue and the flower beds underneath will be a perfect picture of whatever pansies and double daisies we'll have produced. So it's the picture perfect time to look at topiary and celebrate what we've
Yes, and it's been a worldwide thing this year, hasn't it? I mean, I think the gardens in France embraced it in particular, and just sort of staged their own celebrations and has really taken it to a new level, hasn't it?
Absolutely, we're playing our little part. We thought of it, but we are playing our little part, as are lots of gardens around the world. They've joined in
Mm.
because topiary is in gardens large and small around the world. So we will be celebrating it here in conjunction with everybody around the world talking and celebrating their particular patch of
Yes,
topiary.
I mean, indeed, even Disney has topiary, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so now sort of thinking about, the topiary in winter, which isn't a normal thing, but last year you actually had a special event in December, didn't you? Where you lit up the topiary. What sort of dimensions did that give to it? I guess it gave it a whole new identity, didn't it?
Absolutely. Normally, the winter 6 months are for us to plough through the garden, and we see it looking sharp and tidy by sort of Christmas time. By December, hopefully, everything's looking good and crisp. But it's only us that gets to see it. But last year, we got some lights in, lit up all the garden paths, lit up the house, and had a pre-Christmas event. And we're hoping to do that again this year.
Hmm.
Should be fun. Yes, lots of coloured lights on the topiary, and it's quite a magical place. It's at night in the darkness at that time
Hmm.
of year. Yeah, it's.
You're not running around with your head torch on then, though, are you?
I'm hardly needed with my TED torch. Hopefully, all the clippings finished by then, and all's looking as good as it can be.
Okay. So thinking about winter, if it's particularly cold and harsh, and does that affect the topiary, or are there other things that sort of a
I,
bigger threat to the topiary?
I think it affects the topiaries. If it's very cold, our fingers get very cold and our toes get very cold. Usually, we get cold weather, but it never gets too cold, I suppose. The biggest problem with topiary would be if there was a heavy weight of snow lying across the branches, because our crisply trimmed shapes would be, the branches would be bowed down under the weight of it. And that's happened once since I've been here. But gradually they sprang back to life as the weight came off them. And it, not as damaging as I thought it would, but weight of snow can be quite tricky with topiary. And the other sort of winter thing that we get is a lot of rain, which is not good for the topiarists. There's a lot that are clipping it. We don't like it. I don't suppose the topiary really minds, but we sometimes, we're very low lying, and the garden sometimes gets flooded. So that's another added problem for the gardeners to sort out. But yeah, that's what gardening's all about. Tackling those problems and overcoming them, smiling out the other side.
You must dread gales, I guess, if gales sort of blow in.
Yes, and we've had obviously these storm whatever, a series of winter storms and gales. And the garden actually is quite sheltered. There's shelter belts of woodlands out in the fields and to the south of the garden and to the west of the garden. So it's relatively well sheltered, and it's full of walls and hedges, which break the wind as
Yes.
well. But
Right.
what does happen is that our neatly trimmed pieces of topiary, absolutely smooth, razor sharp edges, they do get buffeted about a bit. And when it's like wafting somebody's hair about backwards, or a dog's hair, or whatever it happens to be, when the wind stopped, sometimes we see the odd sprig that's sticking out, and yes, which we had our hydraulic lift back, and we have to look at these sprigs that are sticking out for the next 6 months till we can get it to access it.
How annoying.
It's not usually too bad. We see these things, the visitors don't.
Yes, yeah. And the gardens are partly tended by volunteers, aren't they? So are
Yes.
there opportunities for keen gardeners to get involved on the volunteering front? And if so, how do they go about that?
Well, we do have some kind volunteers come along. We haven't really ever actively chased for volunteers, but those that are keen do come along. They get in touch with me, or get in touch with the office, and they get in touch with me, and yes, they can join in if they want to. Yeah, we have quite a few that come along. Some for now and again, some very regularly, once a week, and some come from quite a distance.
Oh, right.
And some come for special purposes. In fact, we've got a guy coming from Sweden at the end of the month to help us out with a clipping. He came a couple of years ago, and he's good at topiary clipping. And yeah, he's taken a week's holiday to join in on the clipping season. So
Wow.
things like that. But most of our kind volunteers are more local, and they'll help head the roses, pull the weeds, do the edges, and it's a nice place to be out and about, pottering about in the garden. So we do really welcome them. It's nice for us to have them. Yes, to give us news from beyond the walls.
So which month of the year is actually your favourite in the garden? Do you have a favourite?
I suppose it's coming up. My favourite month, in some ways, is sort of September. Well, September, October. Yeah, it's more that at that time of year, I would say October, and not just because my birthday's in October, and of course everybody's their birthday month, but it's although it's the start of a new year, it's the wind down from the frantic upkeep and activity in the garden. Everybody, because we do a lot of clipping, everybody knows what they're doing. Things slow down, and the work is just as fast, and we need to do just as much work, but it's steady away. We know what we're doing one day, the next day, the next hour, the next week. We're just working towards spring again at that stage. So in some ways, it's maybe a bit more relaxed in my mind. Yeah.
Now,
I've done 1 year, and it's not the break, but it's the lull before the wildly panicked, frenetic activity of the next year.
Yes, I suppose it's kind of the equivalent of Strictly Come Dancing ending at Christmas, and everybody can kind of relax a little bit for a few weeks, isn't it? But, now, you mentioned kind of bees earlier on, and I know that bees are a bit of a passion of yours. And we mentioned on social media a few weeks ago that you make your own honey from the bees that you keep there, and there was a bit of a frenzy. So everybody was sort of saying, how on earth does he find time to look after the bees? So can you tell us a little bit about that, and how do you find time to look after the bees?
Well, it's a struggle because, usually the trouble with gardening and beekeeping is that the peak times are about the same, like early summer or late spring, early summer, everything goes potty, but there's 24 hours in a day, isn't there? And 7 days at least in a week. So somehow I squeeze a bit of beekeeping in. And I've been doing it a long time off and on. And yes, it's a thing I do. Every year about this time of year, I think, oh, that's too much. I'm going to try and cut down a little next year. But you could just get carried away with whatever your little hobby is. So hobby, pastime, whatever. So bees are fascinating, and I got into them many years ago, 30 odd years ago, I suppose. I used to tag along with a commercial beekeeper just to learn the trade. Didn't have bees of my own. I eventually got bees of my own, and actually ended up with quite a lot, like about 40 hives, and I used to cart them around the countryside. But children came along into our life, so I got rid of all the bees because there wasn't time for that as well as the family. But I restarted again more recently, about 5-10 years ago, and make enough time to do the bees.
And people can buy your honey, can't they? They can buy honey in the
yes. Well, kindly, the bees make the honey for me. Obviously, beekeeping takes a bit of work, but it's the bees that do all the hard work, really. But, I take the honey off, jar it up, and I leave some with an honesty box outside the door here, and people kindly pick it up.
Yes, because we should mention that you actually live right by the garden, don't you? By the topiary garden.
Yes, right inside the garden. The house here that I'm in at the moment, this is the head gardener's house, and was built for the first head gardener in 1700. That was the French garden designer Guillaume Beaumont. So it's known as Beaumont's house, and I'm number 10 head gardener to live here with my family. Actually, this time of year, the 1st of September is when I've been here for 37 years as head gardener, becoming established now, finding my way around. And
you're finding your way around okay now.
You learn new things, and we're always moving on within that historic context. Yes, I put the honey outside, and the visitors walk past, and some kindly picks them up. Yep.
Very good. And so finally, where is your favourite place in the Levens garden? Where would you most be happily found working away?
I don't know about found happily working away. So where my favourite place? Actually, it's in the garden of Beaumont's house, which is in the main garden itself. because that's where I'll come at the end of the day, and certainly through the summer or the better months if it's not raining. At the end of the working day, my wife and I will have, we call it tea on the terrace, and it isn't really a terrace, it's just a corner of this garden yard where the seats and the table are, and we'll either have a cup of tea and go through the day, or a G&T and celebrate going through the day. So we catch the last rays before coming in. So, and I say it is within the garden itself. So it's it's within the garden, but our own garden within the garden. So that's my favourite place.
A little secret spot. Oh, well, thank you very much for telling us all about that, Chris. And I'm sure that we'll talk again, perhaps as we get into another season and there are new things to sort of focus on. But thanks very much for that. And I'm sure everybody will be very interested indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there you go. I hope we haven't left you feeling too exhausted by all the talk of cherry pickers, hedge trimmers and hydraulic lifts. But maybe it's made you realise that gardening tasks involving just a lawnmower, hoe and spade really aren't too taxing after all. If you feel inspired to head along to Levens Hall and Gardens, you can do so in 2022 until October the 6th. The Hall and Gardens will then reopen in April 2023 with usual Sunday to Thursday opening days. However, do look out for news of a December 2022 winter illumination event. And if you are a garden with topiary which wishes to take part in next year's World Topiary Day in May 2023, email me at jane@catapultpr.co.uk. That's all for now, but remember that life's much more fun when you're poodling around.